Picture this, a world untouched by cities, by roads, by human hands. A world where thunder shook the earth from volcanic eruptions, and forests stretched in endless shadows. Strange animals roamed the land, some familiar, others so alien they seemed born from nightmares. Now, into this raw and unforgiving world stepped the earliest ancestors of us all. Not yet fully human, but something in between. They walked upright, their eyes scanning horizons filled with danger. They had no weapons, no fire, no language as we know it, and yet, somehow, they endured. Somehow, they carved out a fragile existence in the middle of chaos. But how? How did they, against all odds, survive long enough to give rise to us? Tonight, we're traveling back 4.7 million years to witness the dawn of humanity's story, a time where every breath was borrowed, every step uncertain, and every sunrise a second chance at life. Stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll see survival not as a modern convenience, but as a desperate gamble. One our ancestors played, and somehow won. Welcome to the History Teller. Asterisk, to understand survival 4.7 million years ago, you have to imagine the neighbors, and these weren't the kind of neighbors you'd borrow fire from. These were giants, predators, killers. On the African plains, colossal elephant-like beasts with curving tusks lumbered through the grasses. Packs of saber-toothed cats prowled silently, their jaws capable of ending life in a single strike. Towering birds, taller than any man, stalked the ground with razor talons. Even the rivers were hostile, filled with crocodiles that could drag an ancestor into the depths before they could scream. And caught in the middle of this, the earliest hominins, barely over 4 feet tall, with brains smaller than a child's and bodies far weaker than the predators they faced. They were not the fastest, not the strongest, not the most terrifying. But they had something else: awareness. Standing upright wasn't just evolution, it was a survival trick. Rising above the grasses gave them a wider view, a chance to spot danger before danger spotted them. Picture one of our ancestors pausing, frozen, as a shadow flickers across the savannah. Heart pounding, muscles tight. Then, the choice: flee to the safety of trees, or freeze and let the predator pass. This constant vigilance became their shield. While the mighty relied on brute force, our ancestors survived by turning their fear into foresight. But don't mistake vigilance for safety. Even with eyes on the horizon, danger lurked everywhere. A rustle in the bushes could mean food or death. Every step was a gamble, every day a battle. Survival meant being just cautious enough to avoid disaster, but just bold enough to keep searching for food, water, and shelter. It was a balance so thin, so fragile, that a single mistake could end a life. And yet, generation after generation, they managed to walk this knife's edge. This was survival in a world of giants, not through dominance, but through endurance. If danger was everywhere, then hunger was the constant drumbeat in the background. Because survival wasn't just about avoiding predators, it was about finding the next meal. Now imagine this: you wake with the sun, your stomach is already aching. There's no pantry, no fire, no stored supplies, just empty hands, a growling belly, and the land around you. That was the daily reality of our ancestors 4.7 million years ago. So how did they do it? First, fruits, leaves, and roots, nature's wild pantry. Our ancestors became experts at reading the land. They could spot which plants were safe and which were poison. A bitter taste could mean death. A sweet one could mean life. Imagine crouching at the base of a bush, testing a berry with cautious lips, heart racing not from a predator, but from the chance it could burn your insides alive. But plants alone weren't enough. Protein was everything. And here's the dramatic truth: before fire, before spears, early humans had to compete with the fiercest hunters on Earth for scraps. Picture a saber-toothed cat making a kill. Our ancestors watched from a distance, waiting. Only after the predator left would they approach the carcass, trembling, their eyes scanning the shadows. They weren't hunters yet, they were scavengers. And this act of daring, this willingness to creep into danger and steal from giants, kept them alive. But it wasn't just chance, there was cunning here. Sharp rocks were used to break bones, to crack into the rich marrow that even predators ignored. That marrow, the fatty, calorie-dense core, may have been the very fuel that allowed our brains to grow larger, sharper, hungrier for survival. Water, too, was a daily struggle. Rivers offered life, but also death. Imagine bending down to drink, only for the water to explode in violence as a crocodile lunges. To survive, our ancestors learned the signs: hoof prints in mud, animal trails to hidden springs, even dew collected from leaves in the morning. Every drop was precious, and still, hunger stalked them. Nights brought no comfort, bellies groaned, children cried, and the weak were left behind. Yet with each failure, they adapted. With each risk, they learned. Think about it, survival wasn't luck. It was strategy, resilience, and sheer stubbornness. They lived by a rule as old as time: take what you can, endure what you must, and never stop moving. This, right here, was the beginning of something remarkable. Because from scavenging, from hunger, from desperation, would rise the first sparks of ingenuity. The earliest signs that humans weren't just survivors of the land, they were about to become masters of it. If hunger was constant, then danger was the shadow that never left. Because when the sun dipped below the horizon, the real terror began. Night, darkness thicker than ink. For us today, night means safety, locked doors, warm beds, glowing lights. But for our ancestors, the night was a predator's kingdom. The roar of lions echoed across the plains, hyenas laughed in the blackness, the flutter of wings, the hiss of snakes, the eyes glowing in the dark. Imagine being surrounded by sounds you couldn't see, knowing you were defenseless, fragile, exposed. So where could they turn? Early humans searched for caves, hollow trees, overhanging rocks, anything that offered cover from both beasts and the brutal elements. But caves came with their own dangers. Sometimes they weren't empty. Imagine stumbling into the mouth of a cavern, desperate for safety, only to find a bear already sleeping inside. Life was a gamble with every step, yet necessity forced them forward. They began stacking branches, piling stones, weaving grass to build crude shelters. Nothing fancy, just enough to survive one more night. Every structure was a prayer whispered against the chaos of nature. And then came fire. No invention in human history is as dramatic, as defining, as world-changing as the moment our ancestors tamed flame. But let's make something clear. Fire didn't come easy. For millions of years, they feared it, watched it from afar, wildfires tearing through dry grass, lightning striking and igniting the night sky. Fire was power, but power that belonged to the gods of nature. Then, someone dared to touch it. Maybe they carried a burning branch from a lightning fire. Maybe they fumbled, stumbled, and learned by accident. But once they did, everything changed. Fire was warmth in the cold, light in the dark, safety against predators. It drove lions back into the night. It cooked food, making it richer, safer, more nourishing. It hardened wooden spears. It gathered people around in circles, giving them not just survival, but community. For the first time, humanity wasn't just reacting to nature, they were bending it, controlling it. Imagine the scene. A small band of humans huddled around the first controlled fire. The flames dance in their wide, fearful eyes, shadows leap on the walls. Outside, predators lurk but dare not enter. For the first time in history, the hunted felt like hunters. And that fire didn't just protect them, it ignited something far more powerful: imagination. Around those flames, they began to tell stories, to pass down knowledge, to dream of what could be. So when we talk about survival, fire was more than a tool. It was the dawn of human mastery. But every victory came with a cost. Fire attracted attention. Smoke could reveal their location, rival groups could attack. And in a world where humans were not the only predators, holding on to fire became just as dangerous as losing it. Yet through this fragile flicker of light, humanity found hope. Because with shelter and fire, survival wasn't just possible anymore. It was sustainable, and from this fragile beginning rose the very first seeds of civilization. With shelter and fire, humanity had finally carved a small foothold in a hostile world. But survival alone wasn't enough, because no one could do it alone. One human, alone, was fragile, but together, they became something far more powerful. This was the birth of community. Picture the scene. Small bands of early humans, huddling together for warmth, sharing scraps of meat, passing down fire from one family to the next. Around those flames, they built trust. They learned that survival wasn't just about strength, it was about cooperation. Together, they hunted larger animals, one distracted, another ambushed. They shared danger, shared food, shared hope, and slowly, something emerged that no predator had ever seen before: strategy. But to hunt, to build, to protect, they needed more than hands. They needed tools. It began simple: sharp stones, chipped and shaped into cutting edges. A branch hardened in fire, sharpened into a spear, bones turned into awls and scrapers. Every invention meant one less disadvantage against a world of fangs and claws. With tools, they weren't just surviving, they were innovating. Imagine the first spear thrown in unison by a group of hunters. For the first time, they weren't running from predators. Predators were running from them. This was a seismic shift in the balance of power on Earth. And yet, it wasn't just weapons. Tools shaped daily life. Stones broke open marrow-rich bones. Shells carried water. Animal hides stretched into coverings, sewn with bone needles. Each tool wasn't just practical, it was a step toward culture. But here's the most haunting part. With tools and cooperation came something else: memory. Stories around the fire were no longer just about fear, they became lessons. The tale of a successful hunt, the warning of a predator's call, the memory of ancestors. Knowledge passed down, not just lived and lost. And this gave early humans something their rivals lacked: continuity. Generations began to build upon the work of those who came before. A sharper stone, a stronger spear, a better shelter. Humanity wasn't restarting from zero each time, they were advancing, step by step, age by age. But there was a darker side. Cooperation also meant conflict. When food was scarce, groups fought each other. When territories overlapped, violence erupted. And for the first time, humans weren't just prey or hunters, they were rivals against their own kind. Still, through this fragile mix of survival and struggle, the seeds of civilization were sown. Because community gave them something far greater than survival: identity. They were no longer just individuals lost to the wilderness. They were families, tribes, a people. And those people carried fire, tools, and memory into the future. It is here on this edge between survival and society that humanity began its slow, unstoppable rise. But the story isn't over, because the same ingenuity that gave them tools and community would soon lead them to the most terrifying and transformative discovery of all: the power to control life itself. For millions of years, humanity's story was one of constant movement. We followed the herds, we followed the rains, we followed survival wherever it went. But then, something changed, something so profound that it would alter the very course of history forever. Humans stopped chasing survival and started creating it. It began quietly. Seeds gathered and dropped, sprouted where they fell. Grains grew, tubers multiplied, and suddenly, food wasn't something you just found, it was something you could grow. This was the dawn of agriculture, the single most transformative leap our species had ever taken. For the first time, early humans tamed plants, they shaped the land. They cleared fields, dug irrigation channels, planted crops that would feed them not for a day, But for months, even years, the rhythm of survival shifted from the chaos of the wild to the steady pulse of the seasons. But with food came permanence. Villages rose where once there had only been camps. Fires that once flickered for a night burned in hearts for generations. Humanity was no longer just surviving, they were settling. Yet, this revolution came with a price. Where once humans were lean, nimble, and wild, farmers found themselves locked into grueling labor. From dawn to dusk, bending under the sun, tilling soil, hauling water. Bones of early farmers revealed the wear of hard, repetitive work, arthritis, malnutrition, stunted growth. Ironically, by controlling food, they became slaves to it, and worse, by settling in one place. Humans faced enemies they had never truly known before, not lions, not wolves, but invisible killers. Disease, crops attracted rodents, rodents brought fleas. Villages meant waste piled up, water stagnated, and in those hidden places, sickness spread. Outbreaks swept through communities, cutting down the weak, sometimes wiping out entire generations. This was the hidden cost of civilization. And yet, despite the suffering, farming offered something that outweighed every danger: stability. With fields to tend and harvests to store, humans could support more people than ever before. Populations grew, villages turned into towns, towns into cities. For the first time, humanity wasn't just surviving nature, they were reshaping it, and with that power came a dangerous illusion that we were no longer a part of nature, but above it. This illusion would fuel kingdoms, empires, and revolutions yet to come. But in these fragile first settlements, with their flickering lamps and smoking fields, it was still just a whisper of what was to come. The hunter had become the farmer, the wanderer had become the settler. Humanity had planted its roots into the earth itself. But even as they tilled the soil and built their walls, they had no idea that another revolution was waiting, one far more dangerous, far more profound, and far more terrifying. Because the greatest leap in survival was not how humans fed themselves, but how they learned to command the very forces of life and death. Humanity had learned to plant, to settle, to bend the earth to their will. But survival was no longer just about food, or shelter, or running from predators. Now, it was about something far greater: control. Control over fire, control over animals, control over land, control over each other. And it all began with mastery of the oldest force they had ever tamed: fire. At first, it was only warmth, a flickering guardian against the night. But in human hands, fire evolved into something far more powerful. With it, forests were cleared, predators scattered, food was cooked, and stone became steel. Fire gave humanity weapons, stronger tools, and forges that roared like thunder. It was not just a tool anymore, it was a weapon, a crown, and a god. But fire was only the beginning. Humans soon looked at the wild animals around them: the wolves that stalked their camps, the horses thundering across the plains, the cattle roaming in herds, and asked a single, world-changing question: what if they could serve us instead? The answer reshaped history. Wolves became companions. From predator, they transformed into the first dogs, protectors, hunters, partners. Horses gave humans power and speed beyond their own muscles, turning hunters into warriors and farmers into conquerors. Cattle, goats, and pigs were no longer wild prey, they were food on command. The hunter was no longer at the mercy of the hunt. He had built his own army. And yet, the greatest conquest of all was not fire, nor beast, nor land. It was each other. For the first time, humans began to bend other humans to their will. Chiefs, kings, and warlords rose not because they could kill, but because they could command. Tribes became nations, nations became empires, and survival transformed into domination. But domination came at a cost. Wars erupted not for food, not for survival, but for power, land, and pride. Entire peoples were erased not by predators of the wild, but by the ambitions of other men. Where nature once threatened human survival, now humans themselves became the deadliest predators on Earth. And yet, beneath the glory and the triumph, there was a shadow. For in mastering nature, humans had unlocked the ability to destroy it. Forests fell to fire, rivers were bent and broken, entire species vanished forever, hunted to extinction by people who no longer feared hunger. The same fragile humans who once clung to caves now scarred the very earth that had given them life. But still, despite every wall, every weapon, every empire, humans remained mortal. Disease swept through their settlements. A single drought could bring famine. The coldest winter could turn whole villages into graves. They had conquered the world, but never truly escaped its grasp. This was the new line. They walked the thin, dangerous edge between creation and destruction. The line between life and death, and that line has never gone away. Because the story of humanity was never just about survival. It was about ambition, about risk, about stepping too close to the fire again and again, and daring to hold it in our hands. And here is the haunting truth. The same instincts that kept our ancestors alive, our hunger, our fear, our drive for power, still live inside us today. We are the children of survivors, yes, but also the heirs of destruction. The question, then, is not just how we survived 4.7 million years ago. The question is whether we've truly learned how to survive now. Because history whispers a warning. The most dangerous predator humanity has ever faced is humanity itself.